Senate President Troy Jackson and Senator Mike Tipping of Orono introducing two bills in Augusta today to address medical debt.
They say many Mainers avoid doctor visits due to concerns about medical debt, resulting in some paying the price with their own lives. While part of the issue is the high cost of health insurance and prescription drugs, Jackson says his bill aims to safeguard consumers from predatory medical credit card providers.
He says it will ensure patients don't unknowingly enter into predatory medical credit card contracts facilitated by healthcare institutions. Tipping's bill would offer Mainers the chance to settle their medical debt before it's transferred to a debt collector. The bill aims to enforce fair practices by healthcare providers when selling medical debt.
At a time when people are at their most vulnerable, when they're dealing with family, themselves, the only real thing that they're concerned about is trying to get over or help somebody get over a real health issue. I don't believe that's a time that they should have to worry about predatory companies taking advantage of them. Aren't the guys that repay medical bills?
This will not solve the broader systemic problems here. It won't fix a broken system, but it will help a specific awful situation. And that's when Mainers are suffering from an illness or an injury, they're trying to recover, and they're getting calls from a collection agency trying to collect on the medical debt that they've accrued. And often those can be some very difficult, very aggressive calls.
According to Consumers for Affordable Health Care, nearly half of all Mainers have medical debt.
Of those, 6 out of 10 struggle to pay for food, heat, or housing, used all or most of their savings, or incurred additional credit card debt to pay off their medical debt. Jackson says more than 4 in 10 have medical debt in their household.